The notification chimed at 2:47 a.m. He was still awake, staring at the ceiling of their bedroom, his bedroom now, he supposed, when her message lit up his phone. Landed in Paris. Don't blow up my phone. I need space to think. Just calm down. Attached was a photo, her and Derek at a cafe, the Eiffel Tower blurred in the background, both holding champagne flutes. Derek's arm was draped casually around her shoulders. They looked radiant. Happy. Like the past 8 years had been nothing but a warm-up act for this moment. He sat up slowly, his heart hammering not with the devastation she probably expected, but with something else entirely. Clarity. Cold, crystalline clarity that cut through the fog of the past 6 months. The marriage counseling that never quite happened, the working late excuses, the mysterious text messages she'd laugh off as just old friends reconnecting. Derek wasn't just an old friend. He was her ex from college, the one she'd always described as the one that got away after too much wine at dinner parties. He'd always laughed it off, secure in their marriage, in the life they'd built together. What a fool he'd been. He typed and deleted 3 responses before finally settling on, "Enjoy your trip." Simple. Clean. No emotion for her to feed on, no drama to screenshot and send to her friends as proof of his controlling behavior. He knew her playbook now, could see the narrative she was constructing where he was the obstacle to her happiness, the anchor weighing down her journey of self-discovery. He set the phone down and opened his laptop. The email from Victor Chen was still there, sent 3 days ago, the subject line reading, "Final decision needed, Singapore partnership." Victor had been courting him for 18 months. Ever since their firms had collaborated on the Jakarta project. The offer was extraordinary. 20% partnership in Chen and Associates, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in Southeast Asia. It meant relocating to Singapore, heading their new sustainable development division, and a salary that would triple his current income. He'd been putting it off. For her. Because she'd made it clear she wouldn't move, wouldn't leave her job, her friends, her life here. Because he'd been trying to save a marriage that had already flatlined, he just hadn't wanted to see it. His fingers moved across the keyboard. "Victor, I'm in. When do you need me in Singapore?" The response came within minutes. Victor was a notorious night owl. "How soon can you get here? We have the Meridian Tower presentation in 5 days. Your designs, your pitch. Say yes and I'll have the contracts drawn up immediately." He glanced around the bedroom they'd shared, at her clothes still spilling from the closet, her skincare products cluttering the bathroom counter. She'd left for Paris expecting to come home to a desperate husband, ready to negotiate, to beg, to accept whatever crumbs of affection she deigned to throw his way. Instead, she'd come home to an empty house and divorce papers. He booked a flight to Singapore departing in 14 hours. Then he called his lawyer, not the marriage counselor she'd been pushing, but Marcus Rivera, the divorce attorney his colleague had recommended months ago when the signs had become impossible to ignore. "Marcus, it's James. Yes, I know it's 3 a.m. I need you to draw up papers. No, I'm not interested in reconciliation clauses. Clean break, 50-50 split of marital assets, and I want it done before she returns from Paris in 10 days. Marcus's voice was alert despite the hour. "I can do that. What changed?" "She did. Or maybe I did. Does it matter?" "Not legally. Get some sleep, James. I'll have preliminary papers by noon." He didn't sleep. Instead, he spent the next 12 hours in a frenzy of activity that felt like shedding an old skin. He contacted a realtor about listing the house. He arranged for movers to pack his belongings and ship them to Singapore. He transferred his portion of their joint savings into a separate account, exactly half, down to the penny. He wasn't running away broke and broken. He was walking away whole. At noon, true to his word, Marcus delivered the papers. At 1 p.m., he was in a car to the airport. At 4 p.m., he was boarding a plane to Singapore, to a new life, to the professional opportunity he'd been sacrificing on the altar of a marriage that had already ended. He sent her one photo before takeoff, him in the business class lounge, laptop open, Victor's partnership contract visible on the screen. The caption read, "Taking your advice. Finding myself. Enjoy Paris." Then he turned off his phone and didn't look back. The Singapore humidity hit him like a wall when he stepped off the plane, but James breathed it in like oxygen after years underwater. Victor was waiting outside customs, impeccably dressed despite the early morning hour, his face splitting into a genuine smile. "Welcome home, partner," Victor said, gripping his hand firmly. "Though I have to say, I didn't expect you to commit quite this dramatically." James laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. "When I make a decision, I make it completely." "I can see that. Come, we have much to do and very little time. Your hotel is 15 minutes away, but first, breakfast. You haven't lived until you've had proper kaya toast and kopi." They sat in a hawker center as the city woke around them, and James felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't running away. This was running toward something. Victor laid out the project details over their meal: the Meridian Tower, a revolutionary sustainable high-rise that would set new standards for eco-friendly luxury development in Southeast Asia. "The client specifically requested you," Victor explained, sliding a folder across the table. "Your work on the Jakarta project caught their attention. They want that same vision but bigger, bolder. This could define our firm for the next decade." James flipped through the preliminary designs, his architect's eye immediately seeing possibilities, improvements, innovations. His fingers itched for his drafting tablet. "When's the presentation?" 4 days. They moved it up. "Can you be ready?" "I'll be ready." His phone, which he'd turned back on during the flight, had been buzzing continuously. 43 missed calls. 67 text messages. All from her. He'd glanced at the first few. What the hell is that photo supposed to mean? "Are you seriously ignoring me right now?" "This is childish. Call me back." "Derek means nothing. We're just talking. You're overreacting." The last one, sent 2 hours ago: "Where are you? I called the house. You're not answering. This isn't funny." He silenced the phone and pocketed it. Let her wonder. Let her feel a fraction of the uncertainty she'd inflicted on him. The next 4 days blurred together in the best possible way. He worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee, creativity, and the intoxicating freedom of a life no longer weighed down by someone else's indifference. The team Victor had assembled was brilliant: young architects hungry to prove themselves, engineers who understood that sustainable didn't mean compromising on aesthetics, designers who spoke his language. On the third night, working late in the firm's glass-walled conference room overlooking the glittering city, Victor joined him. "You should rest. The presentation is tomorrow." "I'm too wired to sleep," James admitted, making final adjustments to the 3D rendering. "This feels... I don't know how to explain it. Like you're finally doing what you were meant to do." Victor suggested. "Not fighting for scraps of someone else's attention while your talent collects dust." James looked at him sharply. "Did I mention?" "You didn't have to. I've known you 18 months, James. I've watched you dim your own light to avoid casting shadows on someone else. That woman in your wife, I assume from the ring you're still wearing, she didn't see what I see. What everyone in this industry sees." James looked down at his left hand, at the platinum band he'd worn for 7 years. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled it off and set it on the table. "Not anymore." Victor nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, about tomorrow. The clients are traditional but forward-thinking. They'll ask tough questions. They'll want to know you're committed, that you're not just passing through." "I'm not. I'm here. Fully." The presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the firm's main conference room. James arrived at 7, triple-checking every detail, every rendering, every sustainability metric. His phone had finally stopped buzzing around midnight. She was either asleep or had finally gotten the message. The clients arrived promptly, 3 members of the Meridian Development Corporation, led by a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Liang who'd built her fortune in real estate and wasn't known for suffering fools. "Mr. Patterson," she said, her handshake firm and assessing. "Victor speaks highly of you. Show me why." For the next 90 minutes, James did exactly that. He walked them through his vision, a building that didn't just minimize environmental impact but actively contributed to the urban ecosystem. Vertical gardens that filtered air pollution. Rainwater harvesting systems that could supply 40% of the building's water needs. Solar panels integrated so seamlessly into the design they looked like architectural features, not afterthoughts. But more than the technical specs, he showed them the soul of the building. How light would move through the spaces. How residents would feel when they came home. How the structure would become a landmark not through ostentation but through thoughtful beauty. When he finished, the room was silent. Mrs. Liang studied the final rendering for a long moment. "Mr. Patterson, I have one question. Victor tells us you've just relocated to Singapore. Permanently?" "Yes, I've accepted a partnership with Chen and Associates. Singapore is my home now." She smiled. "Then we have a deal. When can you start?" The contract was signed by noon. James was officially the lead architect on a $100 million project and a partner in one of Asia's premier firms. Victor insisted on celebrating with the team, a long lunch that stretched into the afternoon, filled with champagne and congratulations and the kind of camaraderie James hadn't felt in years. It was only when he finally returned to his hotel room, exhausted and elated, that he allowed himself to look at his phone again. The messages had evolved from confusion to anger to something that looked almost like panic. "I'm cutting the trip short. We need to talk. I'm flying home tomorrow. James, please. This is serious." He typed one message. "So are the divorce papers waiting on the kitchen table? Sign them. It's over." Then he blocked her number and went to sleep, dreamless and free. She arrived home to an empty house 3 days later, her romantic Parisian escape cut short by the dawning realization that something had shifted fundamentally. Derek had grown increasingly irritated by her constant phone checking, her distraction, her obvious panic when James stopped responding. The fantasy of rekindling their college romance had soured quickly when confronted with reality. He was divorced twice already, currently between jobs, and spent most of their romantic dinners talking about his ex-wives and how they'd all wronged him. By day 5, she'd seen enough. Derek wasn't the successful architect she'd remembered. He was a bitter man clinging to past glory. And James. James wasn't the safe, predictable husband she'd taken for granted. He was someone else entirely, someone who'd called her bluff. The house was unnaturally quiet. His car wasn't in the driveway. She dropped her luggage in the entryway and noticed immediately what was missing. His laptop bag, his keys, his running shoes by the door, the stack of architectural magazines on the coffee table. The kitchen table held a manila envelope and a single key. To the house, she realized with growing dread. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. The divorce papers were thorough and fair, clinically, coldly fair. 50-50 split of all assets. The house to be sold and proceeds divided. No alimony requested by either party. A clean break. And at the bottom, a note in his familiar handwriting. "I've already signed. Have your attorney review and return within 30 days. My lawyer's contact information is attached. I'm not interested in negotiation or reconciliation. I wish you well, but I'm done." She sank into a chair, the papers fluttering from her hands. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be devastated, supposed to fight for her, supposed to make her feel wanted while she figured out what she really wanted. Instead, he just left. She tried calling. Blocked. She tried texting. The messages turned green. He'd blocked her completely. In desperation, she called his office. "Patterson and Associates," the receptionist answered cheerfully. "Hi, I need to speak with James Patterson. It's his wife." "I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson is no longer with this firm. He accepted a position in Singapore 2 weeks ago. Would you like me to transfer you to his replacement?" The phone slipped from her numb fingers. Singapore? 2 weeks ago? But that was before Paris, before everything. No. She thought back, forced herself to see past her own narrative. The late nights he'd spent in his study. The international calls she'd heard him taking. The way he'd been distant for months, not with anger but with a kind of quiet resignation. She'd thought she was pulling away from him, making him chase her, setting up the dynamic where she held all the power. He'd been preparing to leave all along, and she'd been too self-absorbed to notice. Her phone rang. Her mother. "Sweetheart, how was Paris? Did you post photos? I want to see." "Mom, James left me." A pause. "What do you mean left you? You're the one who went to Paris with Derek." "Yes, Janet told me, don't even try to deny it." "What did you expect would happen?" "I expected him to care, to fight for us." Why would he fight for someone who stopped fighting for him years ago? Her mother's voice was sharp with disappointment. "That man spent 8 years putting your needs first. Your career, your friends, your preferences in everything from where you lived to where you vacationed. And you repaid him by parading your ex-boyfriend around town and then jetting off to Paris while he sat home alone." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, you threw away a good marriage because you got bored. And now you're shocked that he finally realized his worth." The call ended with her mother's disgusted sigh. Over the next week, the same scene replayed with variations. Her friends, initially sympathetic, growing cooler as the full story emerged. Her sister, blunt as always, "You fucked around and found out." Her colleagues at work, politely distant when she returned, clearly having heard the gossip. And everywhere, the absence of James. His closet, empty except for clothes he'd deliberately left behind, things from their early years together, clothing she'd bought him that he'd never liked, worn only to please her. His study, cleared of everything personal, just the furniture remaining. Even his scent was fading from the house, replaced by the stale air of abandonment. She hired a lawyer, thinking she could contest something, anything, but even he looked at the papers and shook his head. "Mrs. Patterson, these terms are more than fair. He's asking for nothing beyond his legal right. If you try to fight this, you'll spend thousands in legal fees only to end up with a worse outcome. My advice: sign." "But I don't want a divorce." "Then you should have thought about that before Paris." She signed on day 28, each stroke of the pen feeling like amputation. The house sold within 2 weeks to a young couple with a baby on the way. She watched them sign the papers, saw the excitement in their eyes, the way they held hands and made plans. She remembered being that young, that hopeful, that certain of forever. The day before closing, she did one final walkthrough, alone in the empty rooms. She found herself in his study, the last place she'd seen him whole and happy, hunched over his drafting table working on designs she'd barely glanced at, projects she'd never asked about. On a whim, she Googled his name. The results stopped her cold. James Patterson, named partner at Chen & Associates, Singapore. Meridian Tower, revolutionary sustainable design sets new standard. Rising star architect brings innovation to Asian market. There were photos, James at press conferences, at building sites, at the signing ceremony for the Meridian project. In every image, he looked different. Not just professionally successful, but radiantly, undeniably happy. He'd lost weight, gained confidence, carried himself with an authority she'd never seen in him before. He hadn't just left her. He'd shed her like dead skin and become someone extraordinary. Someone she suddenly realized she'd never truly known, because she'd never bothered to look beyond her own needs long enough to see who he really was. Her phone buzzed. Derek, messaging for the 5th time that week, trying to rekindle something that had never really existed outside her imagination. She blocked him without responding. In the empty house that had once held her marriage, she sat on the floor and finally cried, not for what she'd lost, but for what she'd thrown away without ever appreciating its value. And somewhere on the other side of the world, James was building a future that didn't include her at all. 3 months into his Singapore life, James barely recognized himself. He'd risen at 5 a.m. every day, going for runs along Marina Bay before the heat became oppressive, returning to shower and head to the office by 7. The work was intense, exhilarating, consuming in the best possible way. The Meridian Tower was breaking ground, and with it, his reputation was solidifying across Southeast Asia. But more than the professional success, it was the personal transformation that shocked him when he caught his reflection. He'd lost 20 pounds, not from stress but from actually taking care of himself, cooking real meals, exercising, sleeping properly. His wardrobe had evolved from the safe, neutral clothes she'd always preferred into something more confident, more him. He'd grown a beard, let his hair get slightly longer. Small changes that felt revolutionary. "You look different," Victor observed one morning over coffee, their daily ritual before diving into the chaos. "Lighter. I feel different. It's like I've been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale." The divorce is final. As of last week. She tried to delay, tried to negotiate, but eventually signed. The house sold. Assets are divided. We're done. And you're okay? James considered the question seriously. "More than okay. I keep waiting for the sadness to hit, for the regret, but it doesn't come. Mostly I just feel free. And maybe a little angry at myself for waiting so long." Victor nodded knowingly. "My second wife, yes, second, I'm not proud. She spent 3 years making me feel like I was never quite enough. Never attentive enough, romantic enough, successful enough. After the divorce, I realized she'd been projecting. She was the one who was never enough, never satisfied, never grateful, never present. Some people are black holes of need. You can't fill them. You can only escape them." The words resonated deeply. James had spent years trying to fill that void, sacrificing his own dreams and ambitions, believing that if he just tried harder, gave more, diminished himself enough, she'd finally see him. But some people don't want to see you. They want a mirror that reflects only their own desires back at them. "What about you?" Victor asked. "Are you ready to date again? Plenty of women here would be interested in a successful foreign architect." "Not even close," James laughed. "Right now, I'm dating my career, my freedom, my life. That relationship is going extremely well." But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Her name was Elena, and she was the environmental consultant on the Meridian project. Romanian by birth, educated in London, based in Singapore for 5 years, she had a directness that was refreshing after years of reading between lines and decoding passive-aggressive texts. Their first real conversation beyond project logistics happened during a site inspection. The foundation was being poured, a massive undertaking, and they'd both stayed late to supervise. "The rainwater harvesting system," Elena said, studying the plans on her tablet. "It's brilliant. Most architects treat sustainability as a checkbox. You've made it integral to the design." "It's always bothered me," James admitted, "how we build these monuments to human achievement while ignoring the environmental cost. Like we're conquering nature instead of working with it." "Exactly." Her eyes lit up. "That's exactly the problem. This building, though, it's different. It's a collaboration, not a conquest." They talked for 2 hours, long after the workers had left, standing in the construction site under portable lights, debating design philosophy and environmental ethics. When James finally noticed the time, he was startled. He hadn't lost track of time in conversation with a woman in years. With her, it had always been about managing her moods, her needs, her perception of him. "We should do this again," Elena said as they parted ways. "The conversation, I mean. Maybe somewhere with better lighting and fewer muddy puddles." "I'd like that." They started having coffee once a week, always talking about work, ideas, the projects they dreamed of doing. Elena had a 5-year plan to start her own sustainability consulting firm. James found himself offering advice, connections, encouragement, not out of obligation but genuine excitement for her vision. "You're different from most men I meet here," she observed one afternoon. "You actually listen instead of just waiting for your turn to talk." "Bad habit from my marriage," James said wryly. "I got very good at listening to what wasn't being said." "Sounds exhausting." It was. Elena didn't pry, didn't push for details. She simply accepted the information and moved on, respecting his boundaries in a way that felt revolutionary. Their friendship, and James was careful to keep it firmly in that category, became one of the highlights of his week. Meanwhile, the messages from her, his ex-wife, he forced himself to think, had stopped. Her social media, which he occasionally checked in moments of weakness, showed a woman trying too hard to prove she was thriving. Posed photos with friends who looked uncomfortable. Cryptic quotes about self-discovery and growth. The comments were supportive but hollow, the kind of encouragement people give when they don't know what else to say. One evening, 6 months after arriving in Singapore, James was working late when his phone rang. An unknown number with a US area code, his old city. He almost didn't answer. "James? It's Marcus. Your lawyer." "Marcus, hey. Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, exactly. I got a call today from your ex-wife's attorney. She wants to meet with you. Says she has something important to discuss." James felt his stomach tighten. We're divorced. Assets are settled. What could she possibly? She wouldn't say. But she's willing to fly to Singapore. Her attorney implied she wants, I don't know, closure maybe? Or to apologize. Tell her no. James. Marcus, I mean it. We're done. If she needs closure, she can find it in therapy. I'm not her emotional support system anymore. A pause. Okay. I'll relay that. But James? She sounded desperate. Whatever she wants to say, it's eating her up. After hanging up, James sat in the dark office, the city lights glittering below. He thought about the man he'd been, the one who would have dropped everything to ease her distress, who would have seen her desperation as proof that she needed him. That man was gone. In his place was someone who understood that her feelings were not his responsibility, that closure was something you gave yourself, not something you extracted from others. He texted Elena, random question, do you think people deserve second chances? Her response came quickly, depends. Second chance to do what? Hurt you again? No. To grow and become better people? Sure, but not with you as the test case. Why? Just wondering. James. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. He saved the message, reading it whenever doubt crept in. She was right. He'd built something beautiful here, a career, a life, a version of himself he actually liked. Why would he risk contaminating that by reopening doors that should stay closed? The Meridian Tower rose steadily, floor by floor, a physical manifestation of his new life. And James rose with it, leaving the past where it belonged, in the rearview mirror, growing smaller by the day. The Meridian Tower's topping out ceremony was scheduled for a humid Thursday in November, exactly 1 year after James had landed in Singapore with nothing but a carry-on bag and a determination to rebuild. The building stood 37 stories tall, its facade a masterpiece of sustainable design, every angle calculated for maximum solar efficiency, every surface contributing to the building's ecosystem. Mrs. Liang had insisted on a traditional ceremony, complete with placing the final beam and speeches from the key team members. James stood with Victor, Elena, and the rest of the team, watching as the crane lifted the ceremonial final piece into place. His phone buzzed. He'd been getting congratulatory messages all morning from colleagues, former classmates, even his parents who'd flown in for the celebration. Then one message stopped him cold. From a number he didn't recognize, but the words were unmistakable. I'm in Singapore. I know you said no, but I'm here anyway. I'm at the Raffles Hotel. Please, James. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. Then I'll never bother you again. His hand tightened on the phone. Victor noticed. Everything okay? She's here. In Singapore. Elena, overhearing, frowned. Your ex-wife. The one you explicitly told not to come. Apparently my explicitly doesn't mean much to her. It never did. So what are you going to do? Victor asked. James looked up at the building, his building, the physical proof that he'd not only survived her leaving but thrived because of it. I'm going to finish my day. This is my moment, not hers. She doesn't get to hijack it. The ceremony was perfect. Mrs. Liang gave a speech praising the team's vision and dedication. Victor spoke about the future of sustainable architecture. And when it was James's turn, he stood before the crowd of investors, journalists, and colleagues, and spoke not about the technical achievements, though they were considerable, but about what the building represented. A year ago, he said, his voice steady, I was in a very different place in my life. I was playing it safe, dimming my own light, living small because I thought that's what being a good partner meant. Then something happened that forced me to choose, stay comfortable and unfulfilled, or leap into the unknown and see what I was really capable of. He gestured at the tower. This building is that leap made manifest. It's proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, because it forces you to stop settling, to stop making yourself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be. The audience erupted in applause. Elena caught his eye and smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to a rooftop restaurant with a view of Marina Bay. James was surrounded by well-wishers, business cards being pressed into his hand, offers for new projects, invitations to speak at conferences. He was in the middle of a conversation with a developer from Jakarta when his phone buzzed again. "I can see you're busy. I watched your speech online. They're live streaming the ceremony. You look happy, successful, like a completely different person. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. And I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me or even respond to this. I just needed you to know, you deserved better than what I gave you. You always did. I'm flying home tomorrow. Goodbye, James." He read the message twice, feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge or reconciliation. Just a neutral acknowledgement that she'd finally understood what he'd tried to tell her for years. Her actions had consequences. He didn't respond. Instead, he pocketed his phone and returned to his celebration, to the people who'd supported him, believed in him, helped him build this new life. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Elena found him on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. "You okay? You've been quieter than usual." "Just thinking." She messaged me. "My ex. An apology, I think. Or closure. I'm not sure which." "Did you respond?" "No. And I'm not going to." He turned to face her. "I spent years trying to get her to see me, really see me. Now that she finally does, I don't need it anymore. Isn't that strange?" "Not strange at all," Elena said softly. "It's growth. You don't need external validation anymore because you've found internal worth." "When did you become so wise?" "Around the same time you became so emotionally healthy. We're a good influence on each other." The statement hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. James had been so careful to keep their friendship platonic, too aware of his own recent wounds to risk complicating things. But looking at Elena now, brilliant, kind, respectful of boundaries, genuinely excited about his success rather than threatened by it, he realized he'd been healing all along. Not by forcing it, not by rushing into something new to prove he was over the past, but by simply living well, choosing better, building something real. "Elena, would you like to have dinner with me? Not a work dinner. A real date." She smiled. "I was wondering if you'd ever ask." "Yes. Absolutely yes. I should warn you, I'm probably going to be annoyingly cautious. I might need to take things slow." "Good. So will I. We'll be annoyingly cautious together." 3 months later, James received an email from Marcus, his lawyer. Attached was a scan of a wedding announcement. His ex-wife was remarrying, to someone from her office, someone he'd never heard of. The announcement was careful, diplomatic, mentioning her learning and growth over the past year and finding love again after loss. He showed it to Elena over breakfast. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine of morning coffee at his place or hers before work. "How do you feel about that?" she asked, studying his face. "Honestly, I hope she's happy. I hope she learned something. I hope she doesn't do to him what she did to me. But mostly." He closed the laptop. "I don't feel much of anything. She's not my story anymore. This is." He gestured around his apartment, at the life he'd built, the woman sitting across from him who saw him completely and loved what she saw. The Meridian Tower won 3 International Architecture Awards that year. James was featured in Architectural Digest, Forbes, and Singapore's Business Times. Chen and Associates opened offices in 3 new cities, with James heading the expansion. His 5-year plan, hastily sketched on a napkin during that first coffee with Victor, was being realized ahead of schedule. But the real victory wasn't the awards or the recognition. It was the quiet joy of waking up each morning in a life he'd chosen rather than settled for. It was the freedom to pursue excellence without apologizing for his ambition. It was the relationship with Elena, built on mutual respect and genuine partnership rather than one-sided sacrifice. 1 year after the topping-out ceremony, James and Elena stood in front of the Meridian Tower at sunset, the building's solar panels catching the last light of day, turning the facade into a shimmer of gold. "You know what I love about this building," Elena said. "It's completely self-sustaining. It doesn't take from the environment, it contributes to it. It exists in balance." "Like a good relationship," James observed. "Exactly like a good relationship." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head, feeling the weight of the past finally, completely lift. The text from Paris, the selfie he'd sent back, the divorce papers, the cross-continental move, all of it had led him here, to this moment, to this life. His phone buzzed one final time. A number he didn't recognize, but somehow knew. He glanced at the screen. "I saw you won another award. Congratulations. You were right, about everything. I hope you found what you were looking for." He deleted the message without responding, then blocked the number. She'd wanted him to calm down that night in Paris. Well, he had. He'd calmed down so completely that her chaos could no longer reach him. "Everything okay?" Elena asked. "Perfect," James said, and meant it. "Everything is absolutely perfect." They walked away from the Meridian Tower hand in hand, leaving behind the monument to his resilience. The building would stand for decades, a testament to what was possible when you stopped making yourself small for someone else's comfort. But James didn't need the reminder anymore. He'd become the testimony himself, proof that sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was simply living well.